Amen.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody have anything they'd like to share or?
I think I might. It's a story, and this is just kind of has to do with intimidation, but and this is where I used to work at before. So I worked at a dental office for many years. I started a brand new dental office. I was just saved. It was probably about like a week or two ago. I mean, not when I got saved, which was years ago. And I just remember one day that I was, like I would sit there and I would tell everybody about Jesus, just the love of Jesus and all that. I mean, God radically changed me. So as I was there working at this place, I remember just, I felt like God was giving me so much favor. I was demoted from my job in the beginning. Nobody told me about it. And then after that, God promoted me. I didn't cut my pay or anything like that. So I was a manager, and now I was a front desk. I mean, I was humiliated. I was so just embarrassed. Like, here you are telling all these people what to do. Now they're telling you what to do. Like, it was just so embarrassing. And I remember I was just like, oh my gosh, like how much worse. But I was just like, God wanted me there, and I wanted to be faithful, so I stayed. So at that moment, I remember God was giving me so much favor. And there was a reason in a moment there that he had me at that location in my life. And, looking back at it now, I understood it. But in the beginning, when I was going through this, I was just a brand new believer. I didn't know anything. All I knew is I love Jesus and I want to be changed. So I remember this lady. She was the best way to describe her was Uncle Scrooge. And I mean that literally. I remember on Christmas Day, it was the day that everybody was supposed to receive their checks. And nobody could receive their checks because she wanted her checks first. So she told everybody to wait till after Christmas to give him the checks. And I'm just like, I'm looking at all these things and all these, how this lady was. Wow, like, man, this lady needs Jesus. But I didn't understand it. So I remember walking outside, and the lady, the owner of the company, she has several offices, and she's like, hey, come here. I don't really talk to her. So I'm just like, but God was giving me so much favor where I was at that he was doing something different. And I go to her car, because she's calling me in her car, inside her car, and I'm outside. I'm like, yeah, yes, ma'am. And she was like, hey, I'm going to have a private party. I'm not inviting anybody, but I am inviting you here. I want you to come to my private party. It's only selected few. I'm like, okay, I'll go. But I'm like, well, I have to work, so maybe I might not be able to go. Because I was thinking, no, I have to go wake up in the morning, I have to go to work. I was just thinking about all these things that I had to do the next day, because I worked there for hours. And I think they opened up at 7 o'clock in the morning, and the party was like late. But something told me to go. So I end up going to this party, and I saw so much really wickedness and all of these things. People were just partying. I mean, I was a brand new Christian. I just knew Jesus, and I didn't care about anything else. But I was just like, I'll be there. If I can share Jesus with anybody, I will be there. So I'm sitting there just looking at all these things. Of course, I'm not going to sit there and judge, but I'm just looking at all these things. And God just revealing to me, like, one thing that I saw a lot of was Buddha stuff, statues, and all these things that were going on in this house. And I'm just looking at all these things. I'm like, God, this lady, she doesn't know you. She doesn't know you at all. So again, God's given me so much favor. I am now, instead of a front desk, I am now a supervisor, a manager, and I have a couple offices now. So I remember there was something big that God wanted me to do. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. So I end up going out somewhere else. I end up going to, I was there, and God was giving me so much favor. And I end up at this moment, and I didn't realize this, I gave my 2 weeks notice within like a time frame. I gave it because I'm like, well, this is just too much for me. This is just so much. I can't handle it anymore. My hours, I'm working so many hours. There's, people are just being so rude and mean. I'm just like, you know what, I'm done. But I didn't understand what the enemy was trying to do at that moment. He was trying to take me out because God had a better plan. So I ended up taking the other job. I called my boss, the manager, on my last day, the owner of the company calls me and says, I don't care if you leave or not, you still have a job here. And that was a big deal because she has never done that. So I'm like, okay, thank you so much, but I'm still leaving. So I end up leaving this work. I go to somewhere else. That place ends up being a living hell. I mean, it was just like, God's like, I don't want you here. This is not the place that I have for you. So I mean, it was like 2 weeks. I called the owner back. I'm like, can I come back? But it was like God didn't want me there. So what ends up happening is I leave. I go back to the job. God gave me so much favor, but what ends up happening is I lose, I didn't do anything that God had asked me to do. I ended up searching for another job. Everything got worse. And at that moment, God was making me realize that this is her last hope, was you. I brought you in there because it was her very last hope. I am about to take everything from this lady down to the very ground of everything. So I ended up talking to my friend Rachel. She calls me one day, because she's still working with this company. And she's like, hey, you know what happened? I'm like, no, I don't know. She's like, well, the lady ends up losing everything. They have a building that's a building here and a building here. The building to the left was fine. The building to the right was fine. The building in the middle that was her building ended up burning down completely burnt down. And I just remember thinking, I'm like, God, like, you had this thing that you wanted me to do, but I was so intimidated by all these things that were going on around me, by all these things that were harassing, and I just felt overwhelmed that I didn't complete your mission. And it kind of goes back to what Karina was saying, that, God has, and Janet was saying, like, that was her last hope. She lost it all. And I mean, she lost everything. All of her businesses were taken, everybody took her business, basically. Her business no longer exists. Till this day, her business doesn't exist. Now, God's like, I'm going to give you a second opportunity because you didn't listen to me the first time. Here comes number 2. So he takes me to this other office. Same thing, same situation with a different lady. And she ends up, but this time I'm obedient to her. And I tell her, pretty much this is my small scenario, but it was in a loving way. You need to repent. You need to love your people. And God, if you don't do this, you better watch out. Basically, at this moment, and I had people to help me too, to help me with this intimidation as well. And I was just like, okay, I am going to let this lady, I'm going to tell her, I don't want to fail. I failed you once, God. I'm not going to do it again. So I ended up telling this lady the same thing that God wanted me to tell her, because she was allowed to lose everything. And we prayed for her. We fasted for her. We did everything to help this lady out. She ends up losing it all. She is, I was over there recently, kind of driving by, and her that company, both of the companies that she owns, is no longer in existence. And I felt bad because she was warned. This time I didn't let intimidation affect me like it did before. And it was just all because now it was just like, okay, God, I want to listen to what you have for me this time. Because if I don't, this lady, at least I told her, maybe she might have not listened, but at least I was obedient in that behalf to tell her the truth, that she will lose everything if she does not, because she was said that she was a Christian, but her ways and her actions did not imitate Jesus Christ at all. It imitated somebody else, and I ain't going to say but I just kind of wanted to tell that story a little bit because, look, I mean, 2 people, it was the same dental office as well, and one person, like, lost it all. And I literally blame myself a lot for that, because I'm like, God, I could have been the one to tell her, but I was so intimidated by her and other people and situations that were going around me that I chose not to say a word. And because of that, I always think about that. I'm like, man, God, I'm so sorry. Because one day I am going to get judged for that. God's going to tell me, like, I gave you, authority to take over this, and you didn't do it. I will be judged for that. And I'm like, God, of course I've asked for forgiveness, but he did give me another opportunity for the same situation. And I did complete that one. Rachel is my witness. I did complete that one. And she was there helping me fast with this lady too. So thank you, Jesus, for that. Sorry, guys.
That's good. Rachel, is that true? That's awesome.
Oh, yeah, it's true. I couldn't unmute it. But yeah, I witnessed all that.